Hello, everyone, and welcome to this final webinar on preparing for PhD studies delivered from the South and East Network for Social Sciences. I am Fragkiskos FIlippaios. I am a professor of international business at the University of Essex, and I am the director for the South and East Network for Social Sciences, having oversight for all competitions. Just a couple of things before we start with the webinar. First of all, I am going to be recording the webinar, and the recording will be made available shortly after, in the next couple of days on the website. On our website, you will also be able to find additional webinar recordings for the last few webinars we have delivered, covering similar material to the ones we will cover today. But what's most importantly is that throughout those webinars, I have been addressing questions and asking questions. Students have been asking questions, and those form also the basis of what we have as frequently asked questions in the website, in the relevant section of the website. So that's one issue of housekeeping. The second thing is I aim today to be finishing at around possibly 2:30, where members of the student committee will join us. I will then hand over to the members of the student committee, and then you can have an informal, confidential discussion with them around SENSS, what is on offer, and perhaps get their advice on the proposals and things like that. The third part of housekeeping is I would much appreciate if you could put any questions you might have. I can see there is already one on the questions and answer section of the Zoom call. What I will do is I will try to spend as much time as possible on answering questions today. So I'm not going to take the normal route. I'm going to say a few words on SENSS in the beginning of the webinar, and then I have collated questions I have been asked over the last couple of seminars in different slides, and I'll go through them. Perhaps some of them might overlap with your questions, but please take advantage of the time as I will go through some of the material to put any questions you might have on the Q&A, so I can pick them up. I will reading them for the purposes of the recording and then answering them live. So these are the last. This is the last part of housekeeping. This is the last of our webinars, and it's the last of our webinars because we're rapidly approaching the Christmas period. Most universities and most of our partners will be closed over the Christmas periods, and then soon after we return from the Christmas closure, the deadline of the competition is going to be almost imminent. I just want to very clearly say that the deadline for the SENSS competition is on the 14th of January at 12 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, that is British time, not in your home country zone. So that's something that I have stressed before. People have missed the competition deadline by a few hours just because they thought it's going to be 12 o'clock in their home zone. It's 12 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time on the 14th of January. So it's effectively a month and 10 days from today. So that's why this is the last webinar we're holding. Answering questions, of course, we will be monitoring our email inboxes. Should you have any questions, you could address those questions to the admin inbox at sense.ttp.ac.uk, and those questions will then be distributed. If you have any issues with the SWIFT system, the application, and everything like that, that's the right email for the questions, and I'll put that email in front of you at the end of the presentation. So let me start by very quickly saying a few words about SENSS, making sense of SENSS, the South and East Network for Social Sciences. And please, I can see the questions coming through. Please put your questions in the box there. I'll give you some time throughout the presentation. What is SENSS? We are what we call a doctoral training partnership. There are 14 plus us doctoral training partnerships covering the wide of the UK and Northern Ireland. We get funding from an organization called Economic and Social Research Council, which is one of the 7 councils supported by UK Research and Innovation. And using the funding, we award and manage studentships and postdoctoral fellowships. We have roughly about 40 to 42 studentships every year. So at the moment, we got a cohort of 84. And we have 4 postdoctoral fellows every year again. So the first round of postdoctoral fellows just started in October. A very common question I get here is, can we apply to multiple doctoral training partnerships? And the list is there on the website. The answer is yes. You can make multiple applications, and therefore you can apply to SENSS, you can apply to our partner doctoral training partnership in the Southeast, which is called CDARC. You can apply to the South Coast DTP, you can apply to Cambridge DTP. You can only make 1 application per DTP in terms of the student-led competition, and therefore you can apply to as many doctoral training partnerships with the same proposal as you like, as long as you secure supervisory support. Now, we have 8 institutions being members, and therefore your application should come through one of those institutions. So you cannot apply to multiple institutions for SENSS. And your institution, the institutions that form the partnership are University of East Anglia, University of Essex, which is the coordinating institution, Goldsmiths, City, Lincoln, Cranfield, Middlesex, and Roehampton. There is no quota with regards to how many studentships each of those institutions will attract. So each and every institution has an open kind of part in the competition, and depending on the quality of their candidates, they can secure studentship. So there is no quota in terms of each institution, so it doesn't really matter as long as you have which institutions you apply through, as long as you have strong supervisory support and a good proposal. And as I said, we've got over 40 studentships starting in 2023 and over 40 in 2024. So that's the rough number we give. Someone might ask me, and what are the overall numbers of the competition, and how do you end up with those 40 that receive the funding? The answer is there are several stages to the competition. The first stage is the application stage, which is what we're talking about right now. We usually receive anything between 700 and 800 applications. Looking at the data for this year, there were probably about 600 profiles already created on our system, and over 150 applications already submitted a month and 10 days before the actual deadline. Out of those 600, institutions get to do the first shift. So institutions basically nominate. Out of those 600, roughly 180. If you are successful, you get notified that your application has been progressed to the next stage, which is the thematic review stage. If you're unsuccessful, your home institution will be giving you feedback. Thematic panels, the 6 thematic panels, which I'll mention in a minute, review those applications, and then they make nominations to the management board. Each thematic panel has a number of nominations it can make, and out of those nominations, we create a large list of about 80 students that go to the management board for the final approval. If you are unsuccessful at the thematic board stage, you receive feedback from SENSS. If you are successful and progressed, we let you know that you are being progressed to the management board. And usually in the beginning of April, the management board basically awards studentships on the basis of quality on that list. If you are in the top, you will get a studentship. If you are further down, we keep you as reserves because sometimes we get declines, and therefore we need to basically move forward. And again, at that stage, if you are successful, you receive an informal and then a formal offer. If you're unsuccessful, you receive feedback from SENSS. Out of those 40 studentships, just to also put it as an important part, we have to perform a quota for international ones. So out of those 40 studentships, roughly 11 to 12, maximum 13 are going to be allocated to international students. That's The reason for that is that ESRC is asking us to put a quota of about 30% to the total number of international students per cohort. And therefore, that makes the competition, I'm afraid to say, very competitive for international candidates. Who is an international candidate? Look, anybody who doesn't hold British citizenship, anybody who does not have EU settled or pre-settled status, or international citizenship and an indefinite leave to remain in the UK, anybody who is not in one of those three categories is being considered an international candidate. Anybody else is a home, what we call a home candidate. So British citizens, EU settled and pre-settled status, and international candidates with an indefinite leave to remain in the UK are the ones that we consider home ones, and therefore they don't enter that quota. We offer a range of training. We offer access to a network of external organizations for your placements. We offer additional funding for overseas visits and fieldwork. You get funding to attend conferences, events, and of course, a virtual learning environment where you can explore all these opportunities. As I mentioned earlier, we are organized in 6 pathways. They're not in order of importance. They're equal to us. Each one of us has its own special place: sustainability and climate emergency, health, well-being and social care, justice institutions and social change, resolving uncertainty and addressing crisis, digital social sciences, and the advanced methods in social and economic research. On the website again, and I keep pointing you towards the website because we put a lot of effort in developing the website, there are specific micro pages for those themes with an introduction from the theme, as well as the projects that are currently under this theme, potential students, supervisors, and the institutions that participate. In order to apply to a specific theme, the institution you're applying through has to be a member of that theme. I can say here that we usually go by exception. So for example, there are only a few exceptions where an institution does not participate in a theme, and that is Cranfield under the health and well-being one and the advanced methods, Lincoln under the advanced methods, and Middlesex under the digital social sciences. In all other cases, institutions participate in those themes and we can accept applications. So steps is to apply for a place at your home institution, create an HI apply, and develop your proposal with your supervisor. Very quickly, and then I'll go into the questions. How do you write a strong proposal? My advice has always been to the different webinars that you need to look through the website. You need to look through the profiles of students that have received funding already. And we have all the profiles of the full 84 students on the website. And then you could see, whether it resembles what you want to do. I've got a couple of examples, a few examples here. BBEC's project is in sustainability and climate emergency at the University of East Anglia. Deborah's project is at Cranfield, as well as Mason's. Gemma is in health, well-being and social care at City. Kwame is in justice institutions and social change. Morgan is in the advanced methods, and Holly is in digital social sciences. So giving you a sense of topics, projects, institutions. Some institutions have strengths in certain areas, other institutions have strengths in other areas. It's going to give you inspiration for your profile, for your project. So discuss your research proposal with your supervisor. You will be interviewed as part of your university admission process. And my suggestion there is that you try to incorporate feedback. Read very carefully the application guidance and ensure you allow enough time for your supervisor to provide the supporting statement. The application has 2 stages. The stage 1 is you submit your proposal and your personal statement. Stage 2, your supervisor has to submit their own supervisor statement on your application. And the supervisory team is auto-emailed to request a statement once you submit your application. So please work in collaboration with your supervisor to ensure that you give them, allow them enough time to submit their own supporting statement. The supporting statement of the supervisor is an integral part of the application. The way we assess the application is on the basis of 5 criteria. First of all is the quality and the feasibility of the proposal. So is it a good proposal? Does it cover the right type of literature? Is it an innovative one? We then look at whether you're using multiple disciplines. Is it interdisciplinary? We also ask you to tell us a bit about the impact you expect, and we evaluate your impact potential. And then we look at your profile and whether you're well prepared for the proposed research and the future career. Finally, we look at the supervisory statement, and we look at the quality of the local research environment, the supervisory expertise, and the training offered, and that is also part of the application process. And this is why I said it's quite important to work collaboratively with your supervisor to submit the proposal. Right, I'll pause here, and over the next slides, I've got a few questions that students have raised in previous webinars, but I think it's a good time for me now to take the 14 questions which are already there. I'll read them for the purpose of the recording, as I said. First question is, I'm wondering how long would be best to prepare the proposal. I decided to join at the last minute, and now I only have 1 day to edit and finalize it. I already have the proposal I used when applying to the university, so I will edit according to the relevant questions. The answer is yes. Look, if you have a ready-made proposal that you've submitted for the university, you can utilize that to apply for SENSS. Although I'm a bit puzzled, basically, from your statement that you only have 1 day to edit and finalize it. The SENSS competition deadline is on the 14th of January. So there is still quite a substantial amount of time. I know and appreciate that occasionally institutions have their own deadlines for SENSS, and that's something that you need to check with your home institution. But even if you apply to that institution, you can still work with the supervisory team to finalize your application for SENSS. So that is absolutely fine. If you've got the proposal at the moment and the supervisory support, you're absolutely fine. You're well within time to submit your application by the SENSS deadline. The next question is, do you both of your SENSS supervisors need to be active researchers in the area and have published something towards REF, or is the primary supervisor? Well, we would expect supervisors to be what the SRC calls eligible, which means that they should be research active. Now, the question around REF is a very strange, it's a very interesting one, because we've debated a lot within SENSS. So, for example, someone that started their career post-REF 2023, REF 2021, I'm sorry, they wouldn't be submitted to that REF. But if they are research active, that is absolutely fine. So the REF submission on its own doesn't say anything in terms of it exists or it doesn't exist. We would like, though, all supervisors to be research active and have been considered research active by the home institution. At SENSS, we're not doing those checks. It is the institution's responsibility to ensure that the supervisory team that is supporting the student is research active and they have the relevant expertise. So, and that is also reflected in the supervisory statement. So imagine the panels receiving a supervisory statement where only one of the two supervisors is research active and the other is not. That would be quite problematic. The next question is from someone who asks, I'm actually trying to apply for a master's degree, so I want to be sure I'm on track. No, you're not applying for a master's degree, you're applying for a PhD. And then the process is, even if you don't have a master's, so we do get applications from students that don't have a master's, the process is that we will look at your application, we would look at your existing research training, we would look at the statement of the supervisor, and then we might decide to award you additional time. So the length of the awards we give is anything between 3.5 years, which is the standard length, and that covers 3 years for the PhD, 3 months for the integrated placements, 3 months for any additional training you might need. But if you come straight from an undergraduate with no research training, then that funding period can go up to 4.5 years. And that means that we will be able to fund not only the PhD, the 3.5 years, but an additional year for you to do a master's. But the application is for a PhD. And then what we do is through that application, we will identify a potential master's. And in our offer letter, we will say, we're offering you 4.5 years, and we expect you to undertake this master's, which is something that we do in collaboration with the supervisory team. The next question is, in which section of the proposal do you expect to link directly to our themes? So the answer there is that there is a question at the very beginning of the application that asks you which theme you belong to, and also asks you which sustainable goals you trying to address. And then what I would do is in the opening section of the proposal, I would hit directly to why I'm applying for this topic and why I feel directly this topic is integrated in this specific theme. Bear in mind that, and I get this question from time to time, bear in mind that occasionally there are proposals might fit in more than 2 themes. So for example, someone might be working on sustainability aspects, but they might be also applying an innovative methodology. So that topic might go under sustainability, but also it could go under advanced methods. It is in collaboration with your supervisor that you need to decide which is actually the most appropriate theme for your proposal. And having a look through the website and the advertised kind of the themes and the theme introduction, and the type of projects that belong to that theme is a very useful exercise. Next question is, may I please confirm where to find a list of the SRC social science disciplines that is referred on the SENSS application? I understand this is separate to themes, but I'm not sure where to find the discipline. So the SRC, if you visit the SRC website, it has the list of the 15, if I remember correctly, the number disciplines, which range from business and management, economics, law, sociology, psychology, socio-legal studies, things like that. So what we're asking you to do there is we're asking you to tell us a bit about, what are the disciplines you're bringing into the proposal, hence the interdisciplinarity, and the way the themes have been designed is in a way that invite interdisciplinary proposals. So you could have your foundation in one discipline, but at the same time, you might be using tools or literature from other disciplines in order to address the project you're doing. So if you want to go and find the exact list, visit the SRC website. It has a very clear list of disciplines, which is what we would call social sciences. It gives me a very interesting foundation, this question, because one of the things we also very clearly state on the website is that any project submitted to SENSS would have to be at least 50% in social sciences. So we wouldn't fund, for example, projects that are straightforward engineering projects or projects that are straightforward medical projects or projects in arts and humanities. We would expect to see the research questions of the proposal that is submitted to SENSS to be founded, to be embedded in social sciences. And then you could use methodological approaches from elsewhere. You could use, other things, which makes the proposal cross-council interdisciplinary, which means that you might, for example, get arts and humanities elements into the proposal, but the bulk of the proposal, the 50%, should be within the social sciences disciplines. Next question is, can the second supervisor be under a non-honorary contract at the university, or must they be employed full-time at the university, please? The answer is, for SENSS, it doesn't really matter. It might matter for the institution itself. So most institutions that form SENSS have a code of practice that governs the doctoral degrees, and in most cases, they would expect 2 members of staff from that institution to act as supervisors. Now, if that institution is happy to have a full-time employee and an honorary professor as a supervisory team, that is absolutely fine from a SENSS perspective. The next question doesn't make much sense, whether someone can apply individually. So if you could elaborate on that one further down. The application is an individual application. You are applying as an individual, but you're applying through an institution out of the 8 in order to secure a PhD place. So what happens is you apply to the institution for a PhD, and then you apply to SENSS to get funding to do that PhD. So SENSS doesn't actually supervise your PhD or award the PhD. The PhD will be awarded and supervised by one of the 8 institutions. SENSS is responsible to provide you with the funding for that PhD. And given I mentioned funding, just to give you a sense, the funding covers the stipend, which is just over £22,000 per year. And so if you get 3.5 years, you will be getting that amount of money for each year. It also covers a fee waiver, irrespective of whether you are a home or an international student. Excuse me, you won't have to pay any fees to the institutions, and also gives you access to something that we call research training and support grant, which is just over £3,000 throughout your degree, throughout your studies, that you can utilize to fund conferences, pay for participants, pay for subscriptions, things like that. Next question is around the use of participatory or collaborative create methods, and whether that counts as an ESRC collaborative partnership. No. The collaborative, for us, the definition of the collaborative project, and when we ask about collaborator, we would expect to see some form of organization. Now, what kind of shape or form that organization will take, whether it's a government organization, whether it's a charity, or whether it is a third sector organization, whether it's a business corporate, it's fine. But we're not talking about collaborative created methods. So it's not the methods that define the collaborative. The collaborative, when we refer to collaborative partnership, and when we ask you in the application whether you have a collaborative partner in the application, we expect you to give us the name of an organization, and it's absolutely fine if you don't have one. The next question is, someone is relying on archival research for the case study. The archive, for example, might qualify as a collaborative partner. There is no need in the application for a formal agreement or support letter at the moment. So you could name them as a collaborative partner. You don't need and at the end of the day, from this year, we have stopped any kind of uploads. So you won't be given the opportunity to, even if you secure a letter, you won't be given the opportunity to upload that letter on the system. We've done that on the basis of equality, diversity, and inclusivity, because we would get applications that would have 15 uploaded documents from the CV to additional information, the research statement. So we've taken a relatively blanket approach where there is no upload requirement. You simply have to fill the information in your form. So yes, the answer, you can name that partner, that archive, as a collaborative partner for the proposal. If someone gets a conditional offer, does this affect the opportunity to compete? The answer is no. We don't expect you to have secured an offer, but we do expect you to have applied to that university. And what do I mean by that? The process is the following. When the competition deadline closes on the 14th of January, 12 o'clock British time, the SENSS team takes those applications that have been submitted through HI Apply and sends them back to the institutions, to the 8 institutions for their initial shift and nominations. So if someone has applied for SENSS but hasn't applied for a place at that institution, the institution won't be able to match that. If someone has applied to SENSS and applied for a PhD place at that institution, the institution will go back, find the PhD application and say, okay, that individual has applied for a PhD. It doesn't necessarily need that they hold an offer, but has applied for us. We can match that application to the SENSS application, and we can put them as part of our consideration for future nominations, for nominations effectively. So the fact that you hold or you don't hold the conditional offer doesn't actually matter as long as you have an application made to the institution. Do you need a second supervisor at the application stage? The answer is yes. We ask for a supervisory team statement, which means that you would need to have a second supervisor. Now, if in doubt, work with your primary supervisor to identify who the second person will be. Now, the next one is a relatively lengthy one, so I'll take it. I'll take the individual parts. First part is, if we submit a proposal, is there flexibility to refine or adjust it gradually so that it better reflects the supervisor expertise while still adhering to SENSS research principles? The answer is, there are two answers to this one. First of all, there is a period where you can refine the proposal after the submission to SENSS and before it gets reviewed by SENSS panels. That period is the institutional phase. And what happens in that is, on the 14th of January, as I said, we return those applications to the institutions and we send them the SENSS applications. Institutions have the opportunity, working with the candidates they nominate, to allow them to refine their proposal. We're not suggesting that you could revisit and rewrite completely your proposal, but what's suggesting is that minor adjustments can actually be made. Now, the second reading of that question is, can you actually slightly change your proposal as you go along in the PhD journey? And the answer is yes, this is absolutely fine. We can allow for minor adjustments as you go along the PhD to further reflect on the supervisory expertise and perhaps an evolving topic. If there are major changes suggested for your proposal in that same period, the period that you have already started your PhD, in that case, we would ask you to submit a major changes form, because that's something that we would then need to communicate to the SRC. But it is still an option. And we have had that process happening over the last few years because of COVID. For candidates who have full-time jobs, would supervisors typically allow flexibility in terms of scheduling meetings and workshops, provided we maintain the same level of committed to our studies? Now, very interesting question here. The answer is no, and it's a very straightforward one, because you are not permitted to hold a full-time job and a stipend and a scholarship. You can have a part-time job and part-time studentship, and the minimum you could go down to is 50% studentship. So you have to spend at least 50% of your time on the PhD, and you could do 50% of your time, but you cannot hold a full-time job and the studentship at the same time. You will have to select which one if you can't do it on a part-time basis. Based on changes in circumstances, someone applies as a full-time student, later needs to switch to part-time. Would this change be possible while already holding a studentship? And conversely, yes, the answer is you can change throughout your studies from part-time to full-time and vice versa from full-time to part-time, as long as I said the minimum amount of time you spend on your PhD is at 50%. And of course, that is anything between 50% and 100%. So someone could do 80% of PhD and 20% part-time job, 70% PhD, 30% part-time job, so on and so forth. Would a full-time and part-time applicant have different requirements? What is the minimum or maximum time for each modality? I've answered the modality. There would be no different. We would expect exactly the same proposal, the same quality proposal. There are no different criteria for evaluating full-time applications and part-time applications. Once I have contacted the university, confirmed 2 supervisors, which official link or portal should I use to submit my application for the SENSS funded studentship? That is the link that we have on the website. There is a very big button which says up under the student competition, apply here, and that takes you directly to our HI apply portal, which you will create an account, and then you will be asked to gradually fill the different parts of the form. Again, on the website, we have a very, very detailed document that explains exactly what you need to put in each of those boxes. So it gives you very good guidance. My suggestion would be have it open side by side to your application, because it gives you everything you need to know for each of those boxes in the application. The next question is around the supervisor supporting statement. And the answer, the question is whether the supporting statement of the supervisor must be submitted by the 14th at noon. The answer is yes. We have taken a very hard line this year to this. So you need to work closely with the supervisor and ask them to be able to submit the supervisor statement by the 14th noon. We don't expect the supervisors to see the application for the first time after they receive the automatic email from the system. We expect you to work with the supervisor throughout, and therefore the supervisor can actually draft and finalize their supporting statement at the same time as you're developing your proposal. And once you've submitted that, they can then automatically be mailed, and they can submit their part of the application. As I said, the supervisory statement is an integral part of the application. So the answer is yes, it has to be submitted at the same time. If the application is successful, will SENSS team provide feedback on the proposal so it can be improved for the next year? The answer is yes. It depends at which stage the application is unsuccessful. As I said, if the application is unsuccessful at the institutional stage, then institutions provide feedback. Anything beyond that, SENSS provides feedback. We usually are relatively brief in the feedback we provide, because you appreciate we receive hundreds of applications every year. We can't provide detailed feedback, but occasionally, if a student has come back to me directly and asked me for a bit more feedback, because I have access to the feedback, the detailed feedback that is being provided by thematic panels, most of the times I respond with providing some additional details if it is for a resubmission. The next question is around a sample of a successful application. We don't provide samples for successful applications. The reason for that is because every single application is evaluated on its merits, and therefore giving you one successful application might not be relevant to your topic or to your proposal. My suggestion is, if you follow the guidance, and the guidance very clearly tells you exactly what you need to be putting in each part of the application, as well as consult our evaluation criteria. And the evaluation criteria have a detailed table that tells you exactly how an excellent application should look like and a poor application should look like. That is going to be the very best guidance you could get in order to shape your proposal as best as you can. The next part of that question is, I see the description that SENSS encourages interdisciplinary projects. Could you please advise where in the application to specifically highlight the interdisciplinary nature of my research? There is no dedicated section. We would expect you to talk about your interdisciplinarity in the research proposal. And actually, we would expect the interdisciplinarity to be not something as an add-on, but something that is truly interdisciplinary. You know, you're not just simply bundling things. Again, on the website, we have clear guidance about what is interdisciplinarity and what are the evaluation criteria for interdisciplinarity in the projects. In my opinion, if I currently do not have a supervisor, is there enough time to find one? Honestly, it is highly unlikely. And I don't want people to be discouraged, but if you don't have a supervisor by now, it's going to be very difficult to secure one as well as work with them for their supervisory statement. That being said, we have secured funding for at least 2 more rounds of applications. So if someone is thinking about doing a PhD, today, this year is not the last opportunity. We're going to have 2 more rounds of funding for openings in 2027 and 2028. And I've been told by the SRC that potentially there might be future funding as well. So if you haven't found a supervisor right now, don't be discouraged. There's still time to apply, in the future. Sorry, the next one was, could a second supervisor be from a non-SENSS university? The answer is yes. Again, your home institution should tell you whether you actually need 2 supervisors from that institution, and you can then have someone from outside. But from a SENSS point of view, you could have 2 supervisors, one from a SENSS university and one from a non-SENSS university. Usually this is building on the network of your existing supervisor. And in their supervisory statement, they need to discuss why they're bringing someone from outside SENSS into the supervisory team and what kind of expertise they bring. I've applied and offered MSc admission for September 26. Do I need to reapply for PhD? The answer is yes. We fund the PhD. We don't fund the masters. So you need to apply for the PhD, and therefore you maintain the MSc application and the MSc offer. It's absolutely fine. It's something that you might decide to do independently anyway, depending on the outcome of your SENSS. If you apply for SENSS, we will then consider whether we can fund your master's as well. But the application for SENSS is a PhD application, not a master's application. Very interesting question, the next one. Is there a minimum grade needed for the master's? If someone received the pass mark, but the research proposal is excellent, would it be disadvantageous? Then can we apply for the 1+3 instead? The answer is, I'll take the answer. I'll answer it in the opposite way. You don't apply for the 1+3. The supervisory team, based on the reading of your proposal and their view on your existing training, they would recommend a length of studentship. But if you already hold the master's in a relevant cognitive area, it's highly unlikely that we will fund the second master's. That being said, we don't actually consider the mark of the grade of the master's in the evaluation criteria. We don't actually see, at the SENSS level, we don't actually see a transcript of your master's. What we do ask you is what kind of master's you've done and what are the areas that you've covered throughout that master's. So that's all the information we get to see. And that's not to disadvantage candidates who, for any reason, might not have performed. So if you have an excellent proposal, that is what predominantly matters. How many part-time PhDs students do SENSS fund, given that not everyone is in a position to follow a full-time PhD? There is no limit, there is no quota between part-time and full-time. Each application is evaluated on its own merits. So if you decide that you need to do your PhD on a part-time basis, that's absolutely fine. It's your individual application. Out of the 40, we don't have a number. It's basically, it's determined by the applicant, and it's determined by you, how you would like to study towards that PhD, whether you want to do it on a full-time or on a part-time basis. Is there a set amount of individuals who receive 1 plus 3.5 funding? No. Again, there is no quota. We usually try to use the funding in the most effective way. And therefore, if someone has already received some research training in social sciences, we might say, actually, we're not funding a full master's, we're giving you 4 years of funding, and we expect you to spend 6 months taking specific modules from a master's to build up your research skills. So again, there is no specific amount of 1 plus 3.5s or 4.5s, as we now call them. I've already answered the issue or the question around the successful application. One of the things you could do, and perhaps you could ask the student committee's view on that one, is if you, throughout our website, you identify someone who has a topic similar to yours, you could contact them and you could ask them whether they can share their application and perhaps share their experience. It's part of our cohort building. I wouldn't see any harm in asking, someone who has a secured funding already for, their proposal, if it's very close to what you're working on. I would approach them in exactly the same way as I've said before in approaching supervisors, addressing them properly, explaining why you want that information, explaining your aspirations about the PhD. Next question is, what is the required GPA to apply for the studentship? As I said, we don't see the GPAs. The GPAs are not part of our evaluation criteria. Next question is, if I am successful the first time, can I apply the next year? The answer is yes. And should you wish to have additional feedback, usually what happens is the supervisors, because they have already also themselves committed to this application, they ask for this additional feedback, and we are always happy to provide that additional feedback. And then the next question is whether I can start part-time and change to full-time. The answer is yes. We've established that. Is it possible to do the PhD in a flexible hybrid way, partially remote international, if the supervisory team agrees and makes sense with the project? The answer is no. It is part of your funding requirements to be residing in the UK throughout your PhD studies. The only exceptions we have is when someone undertakes what we call an international placement, so goes out and works with an international company or an international organization, or if the project has an element of field work, which you can then apply for additional funding. So for example, you can apply for additional funding to travel to that location where you will be doing the field work, and that is part of your application anyway. And for the period of the fieldwork, you can potentially reside, well, you will have to reside outside the UK, but the PhD has a very clear residential requirement to be in the UK. And actually, the SRC requires that you live within reasonable distance of the home university to be able to travel for supervisory meetings frequently. Is there an example structure for the proposal I can follow? The answer is yes. If you go through the guidance we have provided on the website, has very clear structure for the proposal for that specific section of the application, and what we expect you to cover there. The next question is, I'm currently based outside the UK. I hold a bachelor engineer from Cardiff. I'm pursuing an MSc with the University of Warwick. We have distance learning. Developed a research proposal. I do not yet have an assigned supervisor. My proposed topic aligns with the theme of digital social sciences. Could you please advise how I can identify suitable supervisor, determine whether the topic is eligible for funding? I would suggest that you go and look through the people and the projects that we have funded under digital social sciences. There are specific institutions that have an expertise in digital social sciences, and what I would then do is I would go and search for supervisors in those institutions specifically. So for example, our thematic chair for digital social sciences is Harry Dyer from University of East Anglia, and East Anglia is one of the institutions that is quite strong in digital social sciences. So that would be my suggested approach to finding a supervisor. Although going back to what I said earlier, it is actually a bit challenging. We're very close to the deadline. We're very close to the Christmas closure for a lot of the universities. What can I do to get potential supervisors to respond to my email? I have sent, and I can actually stop sharing here because I think we've got enough questions. What can I do to get potential supervisors to respond to my email? I have sent several emails to supervisors for potential supervision requests, but no response yet, even to the university I finished my master's with. This is a challenging question always, and what I try to say is try to send gentle reminders to supervisors. Try to tell them something that will trigger a response. So, for example, say something about why your project is unique, why you are unique in terms of positioning. That would be my approach. Look, the problem here is that the supervisors receive significant amount of emails, and we actually had a webinar a couple of weeks ago for potential supervisors and how they can support applications. And one of the challenges that supervisors face at the moment is that they do receive several emails every year, and it is always problematic to select the ones that you will be responding to, the ones that you will be working with. I can only say, keep trying. It's nothing else you could do. And as I said, try to individualize your email when you send that to the supervisor. So, for example, whenever I get an email to supervise a student, if I get the sense that this is a mass email that has been sent to several other academics, I'm probably less inclined to respond. If it's individualized, it's more likely that I will be responding to that email. The next one is around leave. If I become pregnant during the time of my PhD, the student is suspended for the time of the maternity leave. Am I allowed more time for finishing the research project? Otherwise, how does it work? Now, if you are a home student, you are entitled to the same maternity leave as almost an academic member of staff, which is, I think, 6 months of stipend and then the statutory payment. Then you would need to return back to your PhD and work for a number of months on that PhD. You can't withdraw, because if you withdraw, you will be we will be asking you to return the money. If you're an international student, I'm afraid to say the allowance is much smaller. So you're only allowed, if I remember correctly, up to 60 days or even less of maternity. And then there are visa implications. The UKRI has just changed its terms and conditions, and we're currently working on the new terms and conditions for maternity and other types of leave. But that's everything you will need to know. You will know once you become a student, it's going to be part of your offer letter and everything like that. But yeah, in reality, becoming pregnant, having a baby, adopting, parental leave, it is covered throughout the stipend. Is there a SENSS deadline to submit the university application? Would it be the 14th? Now, some universities in our network might have earlier applications than the 14th. What you need to keep in mind, an eye on, is whether that individual university might have an earlier deadline, and then you need to apply for a PhD place there, and then you can apply for SENSS in terms of the funding. Do you need a letter of support from our chosen placement? No, the answer is no. You won't, even as I said, you won't be able to upload anything except from the actual application. What happens if our topic changes slightly during the PhD process, different from the one we applied for? I explained that already in terms of the major, minor changes. Minor changes is fine. Major changes, you will have to go through an approval process, which is a process that we have gone through before. Yes, the proposal does have, the next questions around the proposal does have a word count limit. It has actually a character limit, not a word count limit. And that's part of the guidance we provide. So if you go and open the guidance document, that is absolutely, if there it's telling you. Talking about proposal and word counts and word limits and the likes, my suggestion is use a Word or a Google Docs or whatever system you're using to write your proposal and then copy paste that onto the actual online platform. The reason being is that the online platform is an online platform, and it would be a pity to have made significant progress. Something happens, you get a power cut, your computer freezes, and you might lose that progress. So please utilize a stable saving document and then copy paste the material into the application. If you have applied for a master's with a view to pursuing a PhD after the master's, can you still apply to SENSS? Yes, but as I said, you will have to make a PhD application. If I'm applying for the 1+3.5, do I have to make a PhD application or just a master's application? No, you will have to apply for a PhD. And as I said, you're not applying, the supervisory team recommends the length of the studentship. So it's really important that you keep that in mind. So the application to SENSS is an application to pursue a PhD. You can't apply separately for a master's. I've got a follow-up question about work. Very hard to live on 22K in London. Is there an understanding that some part-time work is acceptable while studying full-time? So I take the point of the £22,000 being a relatively limited amount of money, especially if you live in London. And from our side, we keep asking the SRC at every single opportunity to lift the stipend. Unfortunately, it's not even within the remit of the SRC. That's a UKRI stipend, so it's decided very, very centrally. The answer is that we do allow some part-time jobs or some part-time teaching in your institution. Anything else, if you have a full-time PhD, from a SENSS perspective, it wouldn't be acceptable. Occasionally, what happens is students who attend London-based universities, they live somewhere further out, and then they commute into their home university. That's perhaps a question that you could ask the student committee, how some of their members might be managing that with the relatively limited funding we give. Next question is, how do I get assigned a supervisor? I'm afraid you can't get assigned a supervisor. You have to find a supervisor. It's your responsibility. Institutions will not assign supervisors to projects. The guidance is on the website. If you go to sense.ac.uk, there is a section which says funding opportunities, student-led competition, everything you need to know is there. Can you use a chart table to make your project timetable stand out in the proposal? The answer is yes, you could use what we call a Gantt chart. And that's something you could put there in the application. Is there a minimum grade for the masters to be considered for the SSC funding? I've already responded to that one. The answer is no. Julia, I think I've received your email on that one. Now, I think there is a question around what constitutes AQM. So as part of our funding, we have received 3 studentships that we can award to what we call advanced quantitative methods projects. First of all, I have to say that the advanced quantitative methods projects are not only assigned to the advanced methods in socio-economic research. Advanced quantitative methods can be projects that are submitted in any of the themes. Now, the process here, and I'll explain the process, and perhaps that will give you a better understanding of how we evaluate. The process here is that we ask you to tell us whether you consider whether the project is an advanced quantitative method. So you mentioned here decision tree modeling, economic evaluation, multivariate regression, whether they are AQM. The answer is yes, they could be AQM. So we ask you to tell us whether you apply for that AQM award. Equally, the other category is whether you apply for a data skills award or an interdisciplinary award. They're not separate in the whole competition. Those applications go through exactly the same process as every other application. If you tell us you consider your project to be advanced quantitative methods, we expect that to be also reflected in the supervisory statement. So the supervisor in the statement, they need to tell us why they consider the project to be an AQM. That application then goes through what we call the thematic review panel, if it gets nominated from the institution. The thematic review panel sees all applications that have been submitted to that theme that have stated that they are AQM applications, and they can tell us, they can confirm or not confirm whether your application is an AQM1. So assume that your application is confirmed at the thematic panel that is an AQM. That then information gets reviewed independently by myself as the director and the deputy director, and we then confirm or not confirm the thematic panel's recommendation. If we confirm independently the thematic panel's recommendation, effectively then that studentship, that application is going into the management board as an AQM application. And of course, if it's the first, second, or third AQM application, it automatically receives the studentship irrespective of where they are relative to the others on that list. So that's the process. So the process is initiated by you telling us whether it is an AQM, then the supervisor confirming that, and then it gets reviewed by the thematic panels. And the reason for that is that what is advanced quantitative methods for one discipline might not be for another discipline. So we want to see across the full applications that we have at SENSS whether they are AQMs. The reason we have such a strict process is that annually, then the SRC comes back, randomly selects from the people that we have said that this is an AQM, selects one, and says to us, now tell us why this is an AQM. So what I will then have to do is I will then have to go back to the application, the material you provided, the recommendation from the thematic panel, and explain to the SRC why we feel this is an AQM application. So we've got a very robust process, but the initial starting point of that process is your suggestion that is an AQM project, and the justification you provide in the application why it is an AQM project. Yeah, that's a very good. The next is more of a comment about someone for the supervisor question, who recommends putting your best foot forward. You know, someone got a high mark on an essay outlying with the email. You know, what I usually say to applicants is say something unique, say something that will intrigue that supervisor to respond to your email. The next question is around references and who could give you references, whether they are work or from lecturers. The answer is for SENSS and the SENSS application, we don't require reference. So for the application you will be submitting to us on the 14th of January, you don't need to submit references. Institutions for the admission to the PhD program might require references, but these references are not then part of the evaluation process for SENSS. And that was a decision we made several years ago on the basis of equality and diversity. Imagine someone that has been outside of studies for a number of years, a mature candidate that can't access their lectures from 15 or 20 years ago. There's no point of asking them for any reference. They could provide us with a work reference, but does it say much about the application? So in order not to disadvantage specific groups of candidates, we've stopped asking for references. Having a EU citizenship without having any status in the UK, will I still bar for the home pool of applicants? No. EU citizens, only if they have pre-settled or settled status, will be considered home. Otherwise, they are international applicants. And as you can understand, for us, that was a big change, because in the past, EU citizens were considered home, and it has made the international application group even more competitive than what it was already before the change and after Brexit. Could you please share the guidance link if it's possible? I couldn't find it on the website. I'm tempted to say that you haven't passed the first test there. Let me just put the website link specifically on the chat here. Right, so I'm putting the link in the chat, and that is the link for the student-led competition. If someone wants to go specifically to the guidance, you might need to visit a link which basically takes you through to a specific document. And let me just copy link address, and that will download directly a PDF file to your computer. But my suggestion is you go through that first website, you will see it's full of hyperlinks, and all these hyperlinks will take you to individual documents that explain almost everything you need to know with regards to the application. I live in a deprived area. Will that have an impact? Very interesting question. The answer is yes. So as part of our equality, diversity, and inclusion strategy, what we do is we allow institutions to nominate additional candidates that come from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds, and we usually use the polar kind of nomenclature to identify where you are. So once you submit your application, you get an invitation to submit an equal opportunities form. That equal opportunities form is not shared with anyone. It is only for the core team on eyes only. So it's not going out. What we do, based on the information we receive from your equal opportunities form, we classify you as WP or not WP candidate. The deprived areas is one. The other ones are special, particular ethnic minority backgrounds with a special emphasis on BAME candidates, people that have caring responsibilities or have been in care over the years, disability students, mature students. So these are areas that we basically kind of are part of our EDI strategy, and students from these particular groups get additional nomination. So an institution might decide to nominate you as their WP candidate. Now, the thematic panel that reviews those applications doesn't actually get access to that information. So without a strong proposal, even if you come from an EDI or widening participation background, you won't get far in the competition. So the proposal is strong, but you get these additional elements. So it has an impact if you come from these groups, in the sense that you can be nominated as additional candidates. Now, the recording for this webinar, as every other recording that we have delivered so far, is on the website. The website that I've just shared on the chat. If you go on that website, perhaps I can share my screen here, because it might be easier. Let me just share this one. So this is the website I'm referring to. This is the student-led. It's under the funding opportunities student-led competition, and this is, for example, this is the criteria, the additional criteria in terms of equality and diversity. If someone clicks on this link, it will take them straight to the additional information. This gives you a sense of how do I get started, guidance around supervisors, how to get a supervisor, all the notes, all the guidance that we have. And this is where you can access the webinar recordings from the previous 3 webinars we've done. And today's webinar will be here. The registration link will be swapped with the webinar recording. It takes you straight to our YouTube channel, and that YouTube channel basically has available all the recordings. The apply here is the button you need to click once you're ready to apply for the competition. It will take you through to the HI apply, and then here it tells you a bit about what happens after you have submitted your application. So this is the website. As I said, that's where I would go. If you want to find out about the themes, you go under the Who We Are themes, and here you will actually see that each of those themes. Someone asked me earlier about the disciplines of the SRC. So this gives you a very good sense of the disciplines that belong to the SRC, and then each of those thematic areas have its own microsite that you can actually look. There is a discussion about what the theme is all about. You will see which are the SENSS universities that participate, and then you can also see, the SENSS researchers which are engaged in these in this theme. So this gives you a lot of information on each of the themes we have. Right, we've got one more question here. Are disadvantaged populations only inside the UK? What about others, like from Gaza or other places where access to higher education is so challenging? The answer is that in terms of the EDI criteria, we have to go only with home candidates, I'm afraid. But in terms of challenging places and support to those, again, through the Equal Opportunities form, we identify people that have refugee or asylum seeking status, and these are particular areas that all our 8 partners put emphasis on. So it is not, while it is not a SENSS-wide strategy, if you come from one of those areas, the 8 partners that form SENSS will support you and help you in putting together a good application. So that's the way we could, we could, as I said, work around that. And it's not a SENSS policy. I'm afraid this is an ESRC policy. So the ESRC policy does not allow us to apply the equal opportunities criteria to international candidates. It only allows us, the policy, to apply the equal opportunities criteria to home candidates. Next one is, I'm an international student. My project relates to an overseas country and have an external supervisor from that country. In addition to my university supervisor, shall I mention in the application that I also have the external third supervisor? My suggestion would be that you ask your supervisors to put that into the supervisory statement instead of you putting it into the application. So I think the most appropriate place in the application where you would need to mention that external supervisor is the supervisory statement. So work with your two existing supervisors to effectively incorporate that information in the supervisor statement and then reflect on how that external third supervisor supports the proposal and will support you as a PhD student. Could you please answer again, what should be the length of the PhD proposal, not the SENSS application, but the proposal that you submit to the university? Now, that's something that I can't answer. The reason being is that different universities might ask you to have different length of proposals. I can only say that usually if you submit the same proposal, if you go by the SENSS guidance, that should be more than enough to have a good proposal for the university as well. So I would work backwards. I would go, what's the guidance for SENSS? What's the guidance for my proposal from SENSS? That should be enough and appropriate for your proposal in the home institution. How many students do you award every year? Percentage of successful applications. I've mentioned that in the very, very beginning. I'll say it again. We start with roughly 800 applications in the initial stage. Those applications get sent to the 8 partners. Obviously, some institutions receive more applications than others. So an institution like Essex, an institution like Goldsmiths, an institution like East Anglia, larger institutions tend to attract over 200 applications every year. Smaller institutions like Cranfield, Lincoln, perhaps Middlesex and Roehampton attract less applications. We return those 800 applications to the to the 8 institutions, and we ask them to make nominations. Each institution has a number of nominations it can make, and the total number of nominations that institutions can make is about 180. So we go from 800 to just under 200. So almost a quarter of the applications progress from the initial stage to the next stage, which is the thematic panel review. At the thematic panel review stage, from those 180 applications, we progress 80. So 50%, roughly 45% of the applications that get to the thematic stage progress to the management board stage, but that only represents 10% of the starting number of applications. And then out of those 80, we usually award roughly 40 to 45. That's the numbers. The number varies every year because different studentships have different costs. We have a total amount that we need to work towards. And sometimes if, for example, I get someone that has started their PhD, I usually get this question: I've started my PhD last year, can I apply? The answer is yes. We can fund you up to, for the remaining time of your PhD. So if, for example, you've got 2.5 years remaining, we will fund you for the 2.5 years. Now, obviously, this is a less expensive studentship than someone that needs to do a 4.5-year one. So what we do is we look at the mix of the applications there and how much money they draw from that total pot we have, and we go down that list as far as we completely depleted that amount of money that we have. So we award every single penny we have to a student. And this is why sometimes it's 42, sometimes it's 44, sometimes it could be 39. I don't know, it depends on the type of applications. So in reality, out of those 800 that we start with, 40 basically get funding, which is 5% of the original application pool. This is why I say it's worth giving it a chance, but it's extremely competitive at the same time. I have seen guidelines about the key thematic areas on the website, but where I could read about them in more detail, what exactly does digital social science entail? What is SENSS looking forward to most? I have read the bullets on the website, but in more detail. So you've seen the microsite. The next step from that would be to look at the projects of that website, the projects that belong into the advanced methods. So look at the projects, read the abstracts of those projects. That will give you a sense of the type of projects this theme is funding over the years. So that's as much information as we could provide for the websites. As I said, this gives you the general introduction. It gives you the priorities. It gives you the topics that we have funded so far, and most of the thematic areas have at least 3 to 4 funding proposals there. So read those abstracts, look at the profiles of students, look at what they have done, and that will give you a good sense of what these thematic areas cover. Let me check whether we've got members of the student committee here. If we've got, could you please raise your hands? Natalie? Natalie, is it going to be on your own today or? Natalie, is it going to be on your own today? I think I've given you permission to talk. If you're talking, we can't hear you. So there is one more question: where I can have access to research proposal of awarded students or only direct with them? And what we do provide on the website is the abstract of the research proposal. Occasionally those abstracts are lengthy, sometimes they're relatively short, brief, but effectively, if you need to review the full proposal, my suggestion is that you directly contact the researcher. And as I said, you introduce yourselves, and then you also ask, kindly for their proposal. And if they're willing to share it with them, that's absolutely fine. As I said, the reason why we're not putting exemplar proposals on the website is because every individual topic is unique, and therefore it's actually it might be, how can I put it, misleading to put certain proposals on the website because they might not be relevant for your area of expertise or your topic. And one of the things which is actually quite important to stress here, one of the things in your application that you need to provide is what we call a development needs analysis, and it's part of your application. It's a section where we ask you to tell us your prior experience, and that can be education, it could be professional experience, or it could be even lived experience. And in that sense, what we do is we ask you to tell us your existing skills and capabilities, but also tell us what are your individual needs. So every single proposal might be delivered by a different individual, and that individual might have different needs. And as you've seen in our evaluation criteria, 20% of our evaluation comes from you making the case, complemented by your supervisory team, you making the case of why you should be awarded funding and why it's good, and how you can develop and deliver that proposal. So it's really, really important to get a sense of that. And as I said, you could always go and ask that individual person to share their proposal with them. I think the next question, I'll pick it up, is limited. It's not limited to 1,000 characters. It's limited to 10,000 characters. So it's not, the detailed proposal is 10,000 characters, not 1,000 characters. So it then gives you very clear guidance on how to go about the different section. The bibliography is included in a separate section. It's not part of your research proposal, so it's not part of that word count. And we ask you to put bibliography, not references, because we appreciate that sometimes people might want to add their additional kind of material that has shaped their thinking. Next question is, will the well-being and social care theme be less competitive than the sustainability and climate emergency? I don't know the answer to this one. Generally speaking, we got 3 relatively large themes. So sustainability and climate emergency, health, well-being, and justice, institutions and social change are the relatively 3 big themes. Digital social sciences, advanced research methods, and resolving uncertainty and addressing crisis are relatively smaller as themes. That doesn't mean they're more or less competitive, because you could have a small theme with an excellent set of proposals, therefore being very competitive, which is usually the case, or a larger theme, which, a very diverse set of proposals in terms of quality, with some proposals being really, really good and some proposals being not so good. So, and every single year submission is different. So that's something that you could take into consideration. Can I ask my supervisor for help in completing the SENSS proposal? We would expect you to do it independently. Obviously, we would expect the supervisor to provide you feedback on that proposal. And that's, that's an important developmental process. And of course, we expect you then to incorporate that feedback, and they complement that with the supervisory statement.